Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Elevate Facility Operations Using Smart Building Technology for Real-Time Asset Updates and Field Verification. My name is Indira Farah from the ARC Facilities Marketing Department. Now, I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers. Suri Suryakumar is the CEO and founder of ARC Facilities, and he'll be starting things off, and then you're going to hear from John Sterland, who is our VP of Product and Field Operations. So I'm looking forward to a great session. And Suri, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to get things started.
Thank you, Indira, and welcome everybody. So today we are going to talk about facility condition assessment, or what you refer to commonly as FCA. We're going to talk about a specific aspect, a critical element in FCAs, which all of you know as field verification of assets. Now, field verification of assets are conducted typically every 1 to 3 years, depending on the type of building, and is largely driven by accounting and financial requirements. Now, what we're going to talk about today is how could we elevate our facility operations so that we can prevent having to do this field verification of assets every 3 years or so. Because field verification of assets are very expensive and time consuming. Not only that, it is also very disruptive to maintenance teams in facility operations. So let's talk about what those challenges are. What are the challenges in maintaining or doing field verification of assets? So as we all know, as buildings age, so do the assets or the equipment in the building. 30% of the commercial buildings in the United States are over 50 years old. And 70% of the buildings are over 30 years old. Take a moment and let that sink in. So 70% of the buildings are over 30 years old. And as these buildings age, we not only have to service and maintain these devices and assets, but also have to replace them at frequent intervals. Because no equipment is going to last 30 years or 40 years. And if they do, they're probably not at its optimum operating conditions. So think about it. HVAC might last 15 to 20 years. You know, a boiler, 10 to 15 years. A pump, 8 to 15 years. Fans and ventilators, maybe 10 to 12 years. And it also depends on the operating conditions where these assets are installed or where the building is located. Is that a beachfront property? Is it a large campus with 100 buildings? You know, or is it a hospital or a factory where it is being overworked or worked, you know, regularly on a 24-hour basis? So all these things impact, and the assets always have to be maintained. In addition to that, in large commercial complexes, over a period of time, you're talking about 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, you keep renovating, fixing, updating these assets over a period of time due to attrition or, you know, with expansions, remodels, businesses change. You end up having zombies and ghosts. So let's talk about that for a moment. That's another challenge which pops up with regard to field verification of assets. So ghosts and zombies are bad. So ghost assets are assets you no longer have in the system, but they're still active on your books because for whatever reason, the books have not been updated, which simply means you are continuing to depreciate that asset. You also probably have a service contract on that asset. Those are all lost dollars. That's why accounting and finance wants you to do a field verification every 3 years, just to make sure their books are accurate. Zombie assets, on the other hand, are assets which exist, but never got added to the books. So over a period of time, an air conditioner, an air handler, you know, maybe it got replaced over a weekend, maybe it was under emergency conditions. But if you don't update that asset, now it's not getting depreciated. And now nobody's paying taxes on that. Now that becomes another problem related to taxes and your accuracy of your financial records. So that's a second challenge. The third part is, especially in large commercial buildings, over a period of time, you lose track as to where this piece of equipment is. Imagine if you're a campus with 100 plus buildings. Imagine if you're a large commercial building, 3, 4, 5 million square feet. All these devices over a period of time would get commissioned and then get decommissioned. Does anybody know exactly where those locations are? In our experience, when we talk to customers, it's quite frequently customers don't know where this equipment is or where the assets are. And that simply tells you that you are likely going to, over a period of time, collect more ghosts and zombies. And that doesn't bode well for facility operations. So the field verification is not only just accounting and finance. I mean, obviously, accounting and finance largely drive the discipline of doing it every year or 2 years or 3 years, depending on the compliance. But it is required and critical for other aspects of facility management, asset management, maintenance planning, risk mitigation, budget planning. I mean, if you don't budget for the equipment, you're not going to be able to replace them. And then compliance and regulatory requirements, that's an important one, especially if it is a hospital, especially if it is a school. Sustainability and energy efficiency. I mean, why maintain an asset? Why maintain an air conditioner, which is 15 years old, when you can buy a new one cheaper and operate it at half the cost? Insurance is an important element. And largely also lifestyle cost analysis. How is this equipment performing? Is it delivering the value we were supposed to get out of it? And many schools nowadays require to conduct FCAs annually or biannually, just for the safety and the security of the student population. And hospitals typically would conduct them every 3 to 5 years. Now, so these are all the challenges related to really doing a field verification of assets, but what does it really cost? And this is what we talked about initially. They're expensive and time consuming. So obviously, the exact cost of these assessments vary extensively based on the type and the size of the facility. That's a big element. And it also depends on how big the facility is and how old the facility is, right? I mean, that's critical, really. Average cost, statistics show, average cost can vary from 10 cents in a simple building, maybe it's a parking lot, to 50 plus cents, depending on how complex the building is, per square foot. So as an example, right, a 1 million square feet building can cost anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000. That's an average number. We have seen much bigger number than these. So what we really want to talk about is there a way that you can use technology to keep this information always current without having to do this every 3 years? Now, bear in mind, when you do these assessments or verification once in 3 years, it's only accurate the day you do that and record the results. Literally 2 weeks after that, if you updated something, that's not in the field verification. In other words, it's not real-time updating of assets. So your field verification is only as good as of that date you completed the field verification. Very quickly, it gets outdated. And you don't have current information during the period if it is between the two field verifications. So that's really a big challenge for the facilities teams. So let's take a moment and think about, what do you need really to be able to keep information current always, at all times? First, you should be able to access the asset information instantly. That's critical. If you're standing in front of an air conditioner or a ventilator or any device, you should be able to quickly access that information to find out when it was installed, how old is it being serviced, serial number, whatever you need, you should be able to access that instantly. If you have to take down on a notepad and go back later in the evening to access that, that's when you get into trouble. So you want to be able to access that information instantly. You also want to be able to update any information on that asset instantly. If you are replacing something or if you're updating something, you want to be able to immediately turn around, take a picture, and immediately update that information. All of these things technology can help us accomplish that. And lastly, more importantly, you want to be able to locate assets. If you know there is something, an asset is in your system and you have not located, and if you didn't verify that during the field verification, your field verification is never going to be accurate. So those are the three critical elements that one would need to be able to conduct or maintain, verification of assets on a real-time basis. And technology should be able to do that given the current technologies we have. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to John, who really knows all about the current technologies we have and how really we can help do field verification or not do field verification every 1 to 3 years, but be able to have asset information current at all times. John, let me hand it over to you.
As we switch over and we start thinking about the technology itself, how can we use technology to improve this situation, right? Field verifications are necessary. As Suri talked about, there's a lot of good reasons that they get done, but how do we make them less costly? How do we make them more accurate? And the technology that's available today, modern technology, really, is poised to help solve that problem. And so, there's a fundamental difference. So we've got all of this equipment, right? I've got a bunch of photos on the screen here. We've got equipment all over the place. And as Suri said, a key aspect of this is being able to access information about that equipment anywhere at any time, right? And with modern technology, we can do that. And we can do that because all of that can be put onto a simple mobile app, right? So you think about the way you live your life today, right? Every one of us on this session today has a smartphone in front of us. That smartphone probably has 25, 30, 50 apps on it. It's the way you live your life. It's the way you go about your day. And so I would ask you this: why is it not the way you go about your facilities work as well, right? That's where our industry can benefit from this. And having that information on a mobile device, that is a game changer. That is a core difference between technology today and technology 10 years ago or 15 years ago, frankly, even just 5 years ago. In fact, an industry consultant called this an adrenaline shot to productivity, right? Having that information when you're out on the roof, when you are away from your facility's office, is absolutely game changing to this. And it comes down to this core difference. The world is mobile today. That is the fundamental difference, being mobile. Now, some people might be thinking, okay, well, yeah, my CMMS or my asset tracking or whatever, it's got a mobile website. And that's different. That's not quite the same thing as what we're talking about. Being truly mobile means building your technology from the ground up to support mobile devices. It doesn't mean having a web page that fits on a tiny little screen. That's not it, but it's not exactly the same. We'll get into what some of those differences are. And if you think about it, asset tracking, CMMS software, that kind of stuff has been around for many, many years. And this problem exists. And this problem exists because those tools typically are not truly mobile. How do I know that? Well, because techs don't use them. It's really that simple. If they were something that is truly mobile, if it was something that solved this problem, people would already be using it. And that's not what we see, right? A lot of legacy software will claim to be mobile, and that is one of the core differences. Standing on a rooftop trying to navigate a web page that was never designed to be on a mobile phone is not something that's easy. It's not something you're going to do. And so techs don't use it. But think about mobile apps today in the marketplace. Think about all the stuff that's on your phone that you do use, right? Those same people that won't stand on a roof and try to pull that information out of a legacy system will happily, Facebook or chat or Twitter or X or whatever with, you know, with their family and friends and whatever else, wherever they are in the grocery line or maybe on that same roof. So that core difference, understanding that apps, simple and easy apps, are the game-changing difference. And there are tools in the marketplace that are starting to come to our industry where we can leverage this, right? And so, excuse me, I mentioned, you know, how do I know that this stuff is not in use today? How do I know this problem hasn't been solved? Well, first off, there's 50 people in this webinar right now that are interested in solving this problem. But I also know it because in talking to our customers, what we find is that as much as 40% of the databases, the asset information in the databases that we find, is inaccurate. Okay, so then this is our experience with our customers. 20 to 40% of the information in these asset databases is inaccurate. And I mean that at a basic level, meaning 2 to 4 out of 10 entries, records in there is just straight up wrong. That air handler doesn't exist anymore, right? That pump was removed 10 years ago, and yet it still lives on in these databases. Or as Suri was talking about, we've got the other side of that, which is, you know, you've installed a pump and it never made it into that database, which means now you have a pump that's out there that's running and probably isn't being maintained, because if it's not in that system, you probably don't have a maintenance schedule for it, right? And ensuring that this information is accurate is, as Suri was talking about earlier, just absolutely critical to the safe long-term longevity of the operation, and also to the financial aspects of the company. That's really important to be able to do that. And so if we can put tools in the hands of the people who are maintaining it, we can start to improve on that situation, right? So, excuse me, as I said, you know, 2 to 4 out of the 10 records in your system are likely not accurate. That air handler may not exist anymore, right? And that it gets that way because techs are not updating that information when they're out in the field, probably because they don't have the tools to do it. They don't have access to do that. There's now, when you take that a step further, you know, again, we talk about doing these FCAs regularly. Well, how accurate is that, right? Everybody thinks, oh, we did an FCA, I've got an accurate list. Well, does your FCA provider, do they go up on the roofs? Do they go into the crawl spaces? Because when we talk to a lot of our customers, what we're finding is that that's not the case. A lot of them don't, right? They don't go up on roofs. They don't go into those tight spaces. They don't go into all of those, you know, weird little crawl spaces and things like that. And as a result, even after an FCA, what we find is that information is not accurate. In many cases, the information that went into creating the FCA just came from that same database we talked about. They literally will take an export of it, and then based on the year and you know, the age of the equipment and outside conditions, make an estimate about the likely condition of that unit, as opposed to actually going and looking at the unit and making that assessment. Well, you know who does actually go up on those roofs and go into those crawl spaces? Your team, right? Your team does. They have to maintain that equipment. They have to maintain it in order to keep that building operating correctly. Well, if they are there anyway, why wouldn't we equip them with the tools in order to be able to update this information and keep it current? So when that FCA comes around, we're now providing the base set of information that's already an order of magnitude more accurate than what they would have started with otherwise. So it's important to remember that this kind of information gets updated and maintained if you give the team the tools in order to do that. That's, I think, a significant factor. And again, technology today allows us to do that. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and switch over. I'm going to show you a little bit of that technology here. And there are you know, a variety of tools that do it. I'm going to show you some capabilities here, excuse me, that I think are significant. So let's take that simple example. You're up on a roof. You need some information about an air handler, right? You're going to service that air handler. So how do I get that? Well, I could, for instance, just scan the QR code to do that, right? If we've got a QR code sticker on that, this is modern technology tied with an app, right? So you saw just on my screen there, I quickly opened my camera app and scanned a QR code that I had on my desk, and it brought me to the information about this air handler. So I want you to imagine for a second, I'm standing on a rooftop. How long did that take me? 2 seconds, right? Open the app, scan the code, boom, I'm looking at this. So what am I looking at? Well, I have a bunch of information about it. First off, I have make, model, serial number. I can see when the warranty expires, right? I can see, you know, what the unit is. I have a variety of information like that. I have access to things like product data sheets, the service manual, technical data, all of that, right? I can get that while I'm up on the roof. I can also, and this is key to what Suri's been talking about here, is I can update this information, right? So if I make a change, I can go in and edit these details. I can go in and fill in some of that maintenance information. I can update the parts information for this if I want to, right? I can add a note that says, hey, bring the 14-foot step ladder. I'm going to need that instead of the 10-foot, right? Whatever those things might be, I can store that information here in the system. And again, because it's mobile, we put that in the palm of our technician's hands. Now, I'm showing this to you on an iPad because it makes it easier for you guys to see on the webinar, but everything I'm showing you here happens exactly the same way and should happen exactly the same way on an app on a mobile phone as well. So, excuse me, when I am, excuse me, sorry, when I am looking for information, so let's say maybe I haven't gone up on that roof yet, right? Maybe I'm a technician and I need to do that maintenance. I need to go do that, the maintenance on that unit. And I need to know where it is because maybe I'm new. Maybe I just started, within the past couple of weeks. So having this information again in the palm of your hands means I need to go do the maintenance on that air handler. Well, let's quickly go find it. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to search for it here in the system. I can see here's that particular unit, number 6, and I have a location. And by pinning these, as Suri said, there were 3 things we needed, right? Access, instant access to that information, the ability to update that information in real time, and the ability to locate those assets on a map. And so here I am, I've got this information, and you may have this in some other systems too, right? You've got, oh, that air handler's in building number 4, it's on the 1st floor, it's in a storage area. Okay, great. I'm new, I've only been here 2 weeks. There's 100 buildings on this campus. Do I have any idea where storage 1023 is in building number 4? I barely know where building number 4 is. But if I can quickly tap on a map and I can have that technology show me graphically, here's where it is. It's in this room. It's in this storage room, right behind this other room, which is off the main lobby. Okay. Now I've saved a bunch of time. I'm able to go access that information. And again, when I get there, I can scan that QR code and I've got all of this information, right? That can be really, really helpful. When you are talking about, we talked about doing those FCAs, starting teams off with good information. Well, how much more accurate would your FCA be if when your provider showed up, you gave them a map that showed them where every single unit was in your building? You were able to say, here's a map of my roof for this building. You can see all of the equipment that's up there, right? All of that stuff. And if you tap on any one of them, it's going to give you all of the information about that unit, right? So I've got photos, I've got detailed information about when it was installed, make, model, serial number, all of that, right? They also know where to go to look at this equipment themselves. So you've given them the tools in order to make that FCA more accurate when you do have to do it. But for your operations, for your day-to-day needs, more importantly, that information is always current, it's always accurate, right? You get the benefit of having that information to ensure that you're running safe, running safely, and that your equipment is properly maintained and you have good visibility. You can do your proper planning, right? You can plan for the fact that that asset's not going to last as long because it's in a very harsh environment. You can plan for the fact that maybe, not only is that unit in a difficult environment, but replacing it is going to require some extraordinary effort. Like we're going to have to tear out half of a wall in order to get that new unit in and out of there, or that unit out, the new unit in. So I think information like that can be included in a system like this. And again, by making an app, by making it something that you can put in the palm of your hand, you improve the ability for that information to be current. None of this gets updated if somebody has to go back to a desk, open up a legacy system on their desktop computer and enter it. Technicians spend their days out in the field. That's what they do. That's where we should have tools available to them. So I want to show you just kind of quickly, as an example, if you think about that, if you go into any of your asset systems today, any of your CMMS systems today, and you pulled up a list of your equipment, my guess is it's going to look like this. It's going to look something like this, right? And this is what I think of as my Swiss cheese slide, right? This is, it's information that is it's filled with holes. As we talked about, 2 out of 4 records on here aren't even accurate, right? 2 out of 4 of these are probably gone. These units of, it was entered 15 years ago or 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Those units probably don't even exist anymore. But when you've got people who are updating this information on a regular basis, when they're using these tools out in the field, when they have access to them and they can update them in the field, what you get is a system that looks more like this. It's complete, it's correct, it's filled in. Stuff that doesn't belong is gone, and things that do belong are there, right? And that is, again, dependent on having mobile first technology, ideally technology that works when you're offline as well as when you're online, right? Because you may not have a Wi-Fi connection up on that roof. You may not have, cellular service on your iPad if that's what you're using. You may be in a place that has poor coverage. So it's important to understand that you want to have, the native mobile apps, something that operates quickly and is designed for the format of the device. Ideally something that can operate offline as well as online. And so by having those things, that again improves your ability to map out and keep current all of this information. I want to put one last thing up there and just take a moment and think about it. Do you guys know where all of your equipment is? Do you feel like that information is current? If you went and did what I just showed you on the screen just a moment ago, what do you think the results would be? Right? Do you feel good about that? Do you feel like it's accurate? Like I said, the statistics I shared with you, 20 to 40%, that's what we find when we talk to our customers, is for the most part, we find that information is largely not accurate. It's not correct. And that leads to, just trickle on inaccuracies in your FCAs and other reporting. And most importantly, it damages your ability to operate your facility safely, financially responsibly, and protect yourself against those ghost and zombie asset risks and things like that.
John, on that, one thing I would like to add is you showed that list which had, a bunch of holes in it, the verified list exactly, and here's a perfect example as to why that locating the asset is very important, because when you see a list like this, and even if you had a hole, even if you had a doubt about an asset, and you thought that doesn't sound very good, or you thought that's suspect, with a system, a smart building system, you can easily identify where that asset is, go to that asset, quickly verify that's in order, instead of really having to do a complete field verification of assets. So that's one of the important and critical elements of having a technology, which will not only be able to give you the information you need, allow you to update, but also locate that location, exactly like John displayed, where you can literally within minutes get to that location and quickly verify to see, is that device there? Is it changed? You might from memory recall, I recall replacing this air conditioner and it's still showing as something which is 10 or 12 years old. Maybe somebody made a mistake. You can quickly do a dash because you know where it is, and the technology will allow you to get there. And then right from there, you'll be able to access the information to see whether the information is accurate and literally update before you get back to your desk. So as John said, this is dynamic. It's you're doing it as you go along without really having to come back to your desk, wait for end of the day, log on, and try to make sure all the entries are made. That's where the biggest challenge is. And that's where we find customers struggling with maintaining a current list of assets. Instead, depending on the FCAs every 3 years, and the time when the time comes to do that, it's not only costly and time consuming, but like I said, very stressful and very disruptive to the facilities teams. I thought I'll add that, John.
Yeah, thank you. No, absolutely.